So I'm Jerry Starrett. I'm here at Broward University. I'm associate professor in the School of Education, and I'm really excited. I know you've been welcomed, so I won't spend more time welcoming you again. I'm happy to have been invited to be the moderator on the panel. And before I introduce the panelists, I wanted to just talk about the plan a little bit. I'm going to do a short introduction to the panelists. I have some questions, and I will hope that they will, I will ask them for extra things I missed, and if you have questions and we have time at the end, we'll get to audience questions. So that's the plan for the afternoon. So I'm going to start with a short introduction of our panelists, and I will start at the end. Mr. Amalio Nieves is joining us. He's with Broward County Public Schools. He is the Director of Diversity, Prevention, and Intervention. He oversees the PROMISE program in Broward. PROMISE stands for Preventing Recidivism Through Opportunities, Mentoring, Interventions, Support, and Education, which is a program that's designed to keep kids out of jail. In 2012, Broward had put the largest number of kids in jail from their school campuses, and this program was developed to combat that. Thank you for being here, Amalio.
Thank you.
Dr. Gregory Salters, moving our way down the table, he is an Investigations Bureau major with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, where he's been for 20 years. He has done his dissertation work in this area, and I hope he'll have a chance to talk about that. And he was recently honored as a 2015 Mentor of the Year in Broward County Public Schools. So he's working at this from lots of different angles. Dr. Debra Pane is the founding president of Eradicating the School to Prison Pipeline, Incorporated, dedicated to keeping youth out of the system and supporting reentry for those who are already in the system through societal and individual transformation. She is a practitioner and a researcher, and she's co-author with Dr. Rocco of the 2014 book, Transforming the School to Prison Pipeline, Lessons from the Classroom. So I'm excited to have people here to be able to talk about this from various perspectives. So again, whether this is a good idea or not, I'm just going to start with questions. So, and I think I've developed the questions that are not specific to anybody, but I really want the unique perspectives. So maybe since we started our introduction from the other end, I'll start from this end. So Dr. Pane, the question is, from your perspective, and given your unique experience, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to addressing the issue that we all agree needs to be addressed?
I'm not very good at giving one-word answers, but I'll do my best to give a concise answer here. Pretty much, this question addresses everything I have done in this area, basically. My experiences in the school to prison pipeline began as a teacher, and the children that I taught were in an educational alternative outreach program. The issue that startled me when I first began at this school called Troy Community Academy was the fact that I had never seen or heard or experienced any such thing as this school. Which brings me to the main issue with me was my particular mindset. The fact that every child that I walked up to that first day was black and I was white was the first time I'd ever realized I was white. And I'll just say that out loud. That's what got me thinking. I didn't know what to do, so I fell back on my education, and I thought I knew everything, and I didn't. I did not know how to teach them. And so I researched in the classroom the best I could to figure out what to do. And turns out, when I started listening to the students and we started working on the curriculum together, that's when we got somewhere. So then I looked around, second point, from my experience, my initial experiences in the school to prison pipeline. I looked around and realized that I was not kicking anybody out, but everyone else was. So this became my question that I just had to get to the bottom of. It turned into my dissertation research and on from there. But to answer your question, actually, in one or two words, is the teachers and anyone who works with children's mindsets. That's pretty much the root problem, I believe, and that's where we need to begin.
Thank you. Dr. Salter, I'm going to ask you.
Thank you.
Dr. Salter, the same question. From your perspective, given your unique experience, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to addressing this issue?
Okay, I can see we're having some blockage here seeing individuals.
good
Based on my experience, it's kind of interesting. As a black male coming through the system who was not told that you're going to be a success, it's kind of interesting because if you aren't taught to basically dream and what things are out there, you don't know what you're reaching for. So a lot of times when people don't see you as somebody, they don't instill in you those dreams. And you have to look at this pipeline. You have to look at it from a mission statement. What is the mission statement of educators? You're taught to educate. But when you have someone that's disruptive, what are you doing? You're going to remove them because you can't have that one person disrupt the others. Then within the school system, what do? You tie your pay to the achievement of the kids. So you're doing this from an economic standpoint. You want me to teach, I got to get little Johnny out of here. So now little Johnny leaves. Little Johnny wanted to leave, so little Johnny is having a party. That's what you're doing. I enjoyed being kicked out of class. Thank you, bye. Then you look at what is it in law enforcement. When I was in school, you had Officer Friendly that was coming there just to say, how are you doing? Law enforcement, what do? Enforce the law. So when you call us into the classroom, we aren't there to just pat little Johnny on the head. You called us because you couldn't deal with little Johnny. So there are things where some principals and educators use law enforcement to do their job. So instead of them doing things like using our Promise program and other programs, they use law enforcement. So therefore, we arrest. Then you look at Department of Juvenile Justice. What do? They bring the kids in and they're trying to rehabilitate, trying to get them back into society. So when little Johnny is kicked out or little Johnny breaks into a house and the only punishment is 21 days away from his mom, who he doesn't like anyway, everybody is getting this circle together. So we need to come together with our mission statements and realize what the pipeline is leading to. Because now when you look at prisons, what are we looking at? We're looking at the privatization of prisons. So who is it that's actually your law enforcement? They don't look black or brown, so you have some cultural diversity issues and some cultural competence issues in understanding what it is that we do. If you don't understand that we talk a lot or we're engaging, that doesn't mean we're rambunctious. It means you didn't engage me as an instructor. So if you don't engage me, what do? I become disruptive. I'm bored. So this is a pipeline that's going, and it's always looking at a bottom line of money. Whether it is the money from the privatization of your jails or your money from the pensions that we're making in law enforcement. Been here 22 years, and in law enforcement we have pensions. Why is it? And as my dissertation, we talked about the impact of racial profiling. And you see these things happening in Ferguson, and you're talking about, I can't breathe. Well, what about those of us who can't get a job because racial profiling has caused our grades to be low, we can't get out of high school, and we can't get into the colleges? Thank you.
Mr. Nieves, again, the same question. From your perspective, given your unique experience, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to addressing this issue?
As an educator, I really think there are three things, and my colleagues here on the panel have alluded to many of the same issues. And the first one that comes to my mind is how we in the field of education have criminalized a lot of student misbehaviors over a period of 10 years or more. And each year, we progressively got tougher and tougher on kids and not tolerating things that maybe when I was growing up, a long time ago, wouldn't land me up in the hands of law enforcement. And so I really think that one of the things for us over the years that we've learned is that we've continually built these pieces where we've created harsh punishment for students for things like minor scuffles. And now it's hard to really unlearn many of the behaviors that have been put into place over the years. I think a second point that, and I believe Dr. Pane spoke about this, is that as a school system, we've realized that we have not had conversations, and courageous ones at that, around race. And that many times when issues like Ferguson or Baltimore rise up, we all rally and we start talking about race, and then time goes by, and then it becomes about something else, and we mesh it with economics, we mesh it with other factors that are important. But still, this issue is just something that we as a nation are still not comfortable at discussing. And so I really think that's a second piece that as a school system, we have failed as educators, and that's an area. And I think that when I think about being an educator, our behaviors must change as adults. I think too many times we put our expectations on wanting the students to change. And really, it's our behaviors that are ultimately going to bring about student change. But if we don't begin with the adults in the setting, we're not going to see a change in our schools.
Thank you. Dr. Pane gave me a really good segue into this next question. To set it up, I wanted to, when you talk about mindset, and this was the first time you realized how your mindset is placed in the context of this question. But criminologist David Kennedy wrote a book called Don't Shoot. He was on campus that deals with this issue. He was on Barry's campus, gave a colloquium. He was here for a day a couple of years ago, and he was telling a story that was compelling, and I wanted to set up my question. He was talking about a grandmother with her very small grandson, and how she was just totally dismayed the day he started a sentence with, when I grow up and go to jail. And it reflects, I mean, how could we not realize this is what the children are thinking, even, that it's given. So my question is, in that same way, do you have a story that you could tell? We started at this end, now maybe we'll start with Detective Salter here. Do you have a story of something that surprised you in this work, that gave you a new insight or some new direction?
Well, to be quite honest, it's interesting the way that the question is posed, because I could have been that little grandson. So being that little grandson, my whole perspective in getting into law enforcement, I never wanted to be a cop. When I grew up, it wasn't cool to be a cop. When I grew up, that was the man. And what bothers me so much in law enforcement is when we go out there, if you see a child acting up in the mall or you see them with their parents, what's the first thing the parent says they're gonna do? Go call the cops. So if you start planting that in little Johnny and little Mary's mind when they're 2 or 3, how many of them want to be cops? So now if you plant that seed that those are the ones we need to be cops, so that now when they grow up, then they can be the ones talking. So hearing that dialogue is what we really miss. Then also what we miss is how many of us really hear police officers talking about the rewards that we have in our jobs and how difficult it is to do our jobs sometimes. Those are the things that we really need to look into. Because now when you talk about it, many times we talk about this pipeline. Who is it that's actually funneling the pipeline? Because right now, when you have the little kid that says when he goes to jail, that means in his environment, all he has seen is people going to jail. When you go into certain environments and certain communities, that is what they do. But you have to look at the irony of the situation. If you're living in a neighborhood and you're having a lot of burglaries or you're having a lot of crime, what do? You call the police department, you ask for police to come into your neighborhood and deal with it. When we come into the neighborhood, that statistically increases the probability of the residents in the neighborhood being stopped, whether they're doing right, wrong, or indifferent. So it begins this irony, and that's what happens in a neighborhood. So if you're living in a neighborhood that has crime or perceived to have crime, police come in there. So people don't understand how law enforcement works. We work based on what it is that you're dealing with. And if you work more in the communities to deal with the communities, then you wouldn't really need the law enforcement. You would build that partnership. What we're doing in law enforcement, intelligence-led policing, and building partnerships, just like we're doing here in education. Thank you.
I want to ask you a follow-up. And again, because each of you has a unique perspective in that. So can you turn the picture around and talk about some moment where something about the system or the procedures or something was surprising to you, as I didn't realize it worked like that, now I understand this thing I didn't understand before? I didn't mean to limit the question by the example I used.
Not a problem. What we look at, in my experience, I've been with Fort Lauderdale, which is the largest law enforcement agency in Broward County besides the Sheriff's Office. Right now, I am supervising the Investigations Bureau, so all the investigations, your undercover burglary and that reports to me. I've also had the pleasure of working internal affairs. When you're looking at it, you don't understand the power of words, and Dr. Rocco, as much as she beats up on us about writing, one of the things she always taught us was your words are very powerful, and when you're writing your dissertations and you're trying to see if it's important, you write that sentence and ask, so what? Well, in law enforcement, do you realize that citations and arrests mostly are up to the discretion of the individual that stops you? There are very few mandates that say we have to make an arrest. So therefore, when I engage in someone, it is up to my discretion whether or not I arrest you, whether or not I write a citation, how much force I use or don't use. So now when you begin to have that, you have this fight or flight syndrome. And when you even talk about it, that was Cornel West to say you must love my people to serve my people. If you don't love the community that you're dealing with, then that allows me to use any type of force, or I write it down the way I need to write it. It's simple. If you're going down the street, and one simple analogy, because I don't want to dominate this, the other ones have some very useful things that we need to hear, is that if you're throwing something out of your car, you're driving along, and you throw a Pepsi can out of your car, I can write that up as either I can ignore it, don't do anything about it. I can come over, stop you, and write you a ticket for littering, which is just a fine, or I could throw you with a criminal violation of throwing a deadly missile because your car is rolling and you threw that can out and it could have hit someone. So it has varying degrees that we go up, and you will be dealing with that. And what you don't understand is when you get that citation, what happens to your insurance when you get too many tickets? Goes up. If you already don't have enough money and your insurance goes up, then what happens? You can't afford insurance, but you still have to go to work. You continue driving. You get pulled over by the police. Then what happens? Driver's license taken. So therefore, you can't even get a job at Pizza Hut. You can't even drive. So we talk about these things and the economic impact that this has on individuals. And when you stop someone that knows you have that discretion, it creates more issues. And then we roll on and on. Thank you.
Hey, Amalio, again, from your perspective, and this can be, again, surprising in any way, and Debra's mindset, so I don't want to limit the purpose of the perspective of the question, but do you have a story of something that surprised you in this work that gave you a new insight or new direction?
I don't know if I have a particular story. I guess I can relate just maybe how I've just become more knowledgeable through the work. And as Dr. Salters was talking about interaction with law enforcement, one thing that I came to realize as a result of my work was that I never knew that African American and Black families had the conversation with their children as a Latino man, and even though I grew up on the streets of Chicago, I never had that conversation. And my parents never taught me how to interact with law enforcement that I even had to. And so in my own dealings, in interacting with law enforcement as an adult, I probably, now knowing some of the rules, if you will, I didn't know the rules and broke probably every rule and probably got myself into more trouble as a result. So that was one thing that was something very deep for me. And also that doing this work, I never, again, just there are some things we take for granted. I'm visiting campuses all across Broward County, never realizing that on most of our campuses, what's the first thing you see when you get on campus? And that's the police car. And so what kind of tone are we already setting when right at the main entrance of the school, there's a law enforcement vehicle? I'm sure that, again, for our students of color, that impression, that perception is very different. And so those are two things that really have made an impression on me as I've done this work.
So, Dr. Pane, I'm asking you to give a second story, or if you want to talk more about your first story, but that was, I think the insight is just so interesting. So, do you have another story to share, or?
I have a lot of stories. I like to deal with stories. Okay, so back to my original walking up to the school the first day. I'm going to be in the classroom a lot here because even though we also work in the detention center and TGK Correctional, we are always, I am, and who I work with now, are always trying to see how we can transform it right at the beginning with the people that are involved, and that's the kids and it's teachers and so on. So when I very first started at Troy Academy, I walked in, there were these black kids. I realized I was white and thought, okay, what am I going to do? I've already told you that part. But so I started in, finally started listening to the kids and realized that since I had been given support from my director, and the alternative education outreach programs are inside of the regular Miami-Dade County Public School system. They're inside of the alternative ed system. They're way down here, way inside, and no one knows about them because these are the kids that go in and out of the justice system. Now, as they've alluded to, we pushed people, they're isolated basically. So this was all very intriguing to me, and since I was given the support and the privilege, actually, to do whatever I wanted as their reading teacher, well, then I went and did everything I knew and did it my own way with the kids, our own way. We developed a curriculum, and so it's going great. The kids came to school, they couldn't wait, they no longer walked in and put their head on the table, went to sleep, and all this stuff. So this is over years. We got to keep the kids as long as we want. Everything was very supportive, which is one of my main points. Every day I went home and wrote in my journal. I critically reflected every day because I had this thing I just had to figure out. Why were we doing these awesome things? Everybody, we loved it, me and the kids, and everyone else wanted to kick their kids out. They would kick them over to our room. It was really funny in a way, but I was going, okay, what is this? Someone in the world is doing this besides me. I don't know everything, please, but I know that we were having fun. And so I wanted to see what was going on out there. Then I went to get my dissertation with this question in mind. What are teachers thinking? That was my original question. What are we thinking? What am I thinking versus what are they thinking? So, stories. I came upon Rist, the research of Rist, and he followed these kids, this teacher and these kids that started in kindergarten for a few years. The minute the teacher got them in kindergarten, she separated them into reading groups. And he realized they're separated by color, socioeconomic, whatever. And the kids that were of color were back there in the back. And so she separated them. You're a bad learner because you look this way, and so on. So that just shocked me. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I went further on the research, and I finally found Freire. I can't say it because I have a Texas accent. But anyway, so he worked with oppressed people, which I considered, and no one wanted to hear it, these kids were oppressed. So I had them, they were oppressed. Nobody wanted them, they're isolated. Who can do something? So he showed me how we sit with people and we become part of a group. You know, we become the same. We're on the same level. We work together. So somebody had done it in the research world. 2 stories, and then probably I'll get to the rest later. But Gloria, I'll never forget Gloria walking. Okay, the kids come. You never know when somebody's going to come into your class in alternative education. You know, one day they're here, one day they're not. You get a new kid and so on. So here comes Gloria up the ramp, and I always open the door, you know, and hello, always smiling, all this stuff. And here comes Gloria. Well, she tries to kick me. She just does that kickboxing thing. And so I'm weird. So I went, well, good morning, Gloria. How you doing? Have a seat in our circle. You know, I really meant it, and that's how I did. I went, kill them with kindness, that sort of thing. So anyway, and we're in a circle, and all the other kids know now this is a circle, and we never start anything until everybody's, you know, with us and whatnot. We'll wait forever. So here comes Gloria. Well, basically, once you realize, you know, what we're doing, we ended up, she was pregnant, turns out. She was mad, angry at everything else, jobs, whatnot. But when we found out she was pregnant, since we had a project-based, student-centered situation, we made books for her child. So everybody took a children's literature book, related, you know, in their own little retelling, published it, we taped it for her, gave her the video, and had a, you know, shower at the school, and the parents come, yes they do, if you want them to. And so that was a really neat story. And it turns out we were best friends by the end, you know, because they stayed as long as they wanted, and oftentimes they stayed over the years. And the second story is, for this question, is when I had to go get my dissertation, I had to be full-time. So I just couldn't release myself from Troy. So anyways, part of what we had to teach as part of your dissertation studies and do research. So I would take the teacher, and I was in the reading education. I'd take the teachers with me as a group back to Troy for their field experience. And somehow the office let me at school, and everything was above board. But I remember that people would get mad at me. They were mad that I was taking them into this prison-type situation. And I'd kill them kindness, hopefully the teacher education, you know, students too. And we would critically, they'd do the same thing I did. I didn't know what else to do. Write every night, critically reflect and whatnot. Then I can see what they're thinking as well. And we would do it in groups. We'd sit with the kids in a big group. Nobody's alone because you need support. And then by the end, they understood. And it took a whole semester. Some of them really, and I said, write if you're mad. So I knew what was going on. They were furious. Sometimes they would report me, you know, to the FIU board or whatever. But anyhow, so those are 2 stories that stick in my mind, which relate to your mindset, I guess. Yeah. And the trenches.
We're talking a lot about research. You're sitting in front of a room full of education researchers at this research conference. So I'd like you to take a minute, and Dr. Pane, I want you to start this one. Tell them what research you think needs to be done now that would best inform these efforts. And your efforts, everybody else's efforts to help these kids. What don't we know that we need to know? And it doesn't have to be Dr. Pane. Anybody who's got an idea can start.
I'll go ahead and start since you asked. The foundation I started is E-SToPP for short, and one of the 3 goals we have is to conduct research. And I like to call it transformative research because we get, we know a lot of facts about what's going on. We know who's disproportional in all these areas in education and the system. And but what are we going to do about it? Like Dr. Salter said, so what? So my thing is, and I believe that we need to conduct research that actually looks at what we do and we're trying to do to transform systems, policies, and practices that funnel these children into the school to prison pipeline. Look at what's going on in these practices we're using to transform the culture of each situation these kids get caught in, and look at them very closely and see if they're working, see if they're, we're practicing what we think works with fidelity, and then maybe we can move forward. That's pretty much the short version of my answer. Okay.
Okay, I have two different things. When you're talking about your research, if you're just talking about research for edification's sake and just to be an intellectual and to discuss it, one of the things you can do is do some research and find out why is it that we're in here trying to fight the prison pipeline, but in the urban environment, going to jail is valued. So if going to jail is valued and your rap stars and all of this type stuff and everybody's trying to be relevant, then we fight in the wrong battle. So if you're just trying to be an intellectual, do that. If you're trying to have some research that you can apply in your classrooms, and when you're talking about the special ed, or dated myself, the ESE instructionals, when you're looking at that and you're looking at the bottom and you're looking at the top, you have two different things. If you look at those kids that are coming from your suburbs and they're in your AP classes, what is it that you've noticed about them? The next door neighbor is a psychologist who does a psychological exam, and once they bring the psychological exam to you from their next door neighbor, then you must put them in the AP or the honors classes. Where when you look in the urban environments, you have the coach who's the next door neighbor, so therefore they're out there playing football. What we might need to do is find out what are they doing in football and basketball where we can beat the odds getting into the NFL and to the NBA and apply those same methodologies in the classroom. For instance, who is your most powerful instructor on a high school campus? Coach. Why? You got structure. The child acts up. Do they just send the kid to another coach's room when the kid acts a fool? No, they don't. They're right here. They will run that kid to death. They put in there. They tell you what you have to do, when you have to do it, and how you have to do it. Look at the movie Remember the Titans. It shows you a tremendous lesson where you had the white coach, the black coach, and how they deal with the kids, and when they talked about coddling them when they needed to have that tough love. That is a tremendous movie. So when you're looking at it, look at the things that our kids are going towards and mimic that methodology. Don't send them out of the room when I'm over there teaching in the classroom. I don't send them next door. They hope the hell I would. No, you stand right here. We have something that we need to do. Let's do it. When the football teams win, that's when they've gone through the most. That's when they've been through all kind of 2-a-day practices, 3-a-day practices. When you're putting it on us, as black males, we love a challenge. Challenge me. Challenge me. If you don't challenge me, why do I want to do it? Nothing there for me. So challenge them just like the athletics program does. Can you imagine what would happen if we would have a pep rally for physics? If we would have a pep rally for science? All they want to do is have an audience. They started at 3 years old and go up. Mimic what is working, mimic what they're doing, and bring it to what you want. Have two objectives. Find out what their objective is, find out what your objective is, bring it together, and we can get someplace. Thank you.
So Amalio, the research question, what research do you think needs to be done now that would be most valuable in helping these kids?
Two things come to mind. In our own working with our Promise program over the last couple of years, this year we had, as a first semester, over 2,000 students who were afforded the opportunity to participate in the Promise program. 90% of those students did not return or commit a subsequent Promise eligible offense. But there's a group of students, 2%, who have committed 3 or more promise-eligible offenses. And so one of the things that our school board has been struggling with, and then of course they've challenged staff to look at, if this promise program, which is meant to be a wraparound approach to looking at student behavior and addressing the needs of students who have committed some serious offenses, what is there out there? What can we find that will work with that small population so that really no one gets left behind? And so we've been struggling with that. What kinds of interventions, programs, or other things that we can do with that group of students? So I really think that's for that deep end behavior, other than, again, trying to put them in jail or lock them up. Lock them up. And what is there out there that we can do before taking drastic measures? So that's one piece that really interests me. And another piece is just addressing the whole disproportionality issue again. What are some good, effective practices for educators? Again, when I look at our data, our graduation rates, on every indicator on graduation rates, if you're a white female, black female, Hispanic male, Hispanic female, the graduation rate is 70% or more. For our black males, 57%. It was 59% 2 years ago, 58 last year, 57. And then I look on every, in our community, HIV/AIDS is, again, an issue, particularly among our black population, over age for grade students, and then, of course, the whole school-to-prison pipeline. So how do we really begin to, and even with the Promise program, that even though we have this in place and we've significantly reduced our suspensions, expulsions, and arrests, still our black males are still disproportionately represented in those numbers. So that becomes a challenge. And so I'm really struggling and looking for what are some practices out there? How do we reduce the gap? And what do we need to do, and quickly?
I just wanted to, he brought a good tie-in when he talked about the HIV rate, when I talking about what it is that we do. If you talk about the black male, what is it that everyone says that the black male can do? Oh, the elephant in the room, right? They always talk about it sexually. They talk about the sexual male organs of black males. So now when you talk about it and the rate of HIV is high, why? Because we proved it right. That's it. You can go back to Tuskegee studies. This is nothing new. So Tuskegee even knew back then if we're going to spread syphilis, they didn't put it in a book. So now when you look at it, it's all about how you use the information which you have and what you're trying to do with it. If you're trying to harm the black male, you give them syphilis and don't tell you gave it to them because it can go out there. Then on the other side, you're using the rate of HIV to work against us. So what is it that you need to do? These are the things that we're talking about. Research, that's why I say, why do you want the research? Some researchers do it right now, selling drugs. The black males are out there smart enough to put together a business plan, work the business plan in the illegal drug trade and make millions of dollars, just like others do. And they aren't getting caught. When they get caught, they have the money that's doing that. Why? They're using the research, but for the wrong thing. We just got to play for our team. That's all we got to do. Thank you.
And to Dr. Salter's point, I think too, is how do we look at our black males? Do we continue to look at them from a deficit standpoint, or do we look at them for their accomplishments, for the strengths that they have? I recall seeing a video the other day where they had, and I had told this story before, where there was a minister sitting on a panel and they were talking about parent engagement and strategies for parent engagement. And one of the things that this minister said was, when we talk to our children, we just invite them we ask them to be good. He says we need to change the conversation and invite them to be great. And that we limit our children when we just stop at good. And so we really have to start changing the conversation and how it is that we talk about our youth. How do we address our youth? How do we empower our youth? I think that's important part of this. And again, the research driving that, again, and that let's stop looking at the deficits, but look at the strengths that our youth bring to the table.
So that brings up the last, my point about this, to bounce off from what they just said, excuse me. So the research, to me, and to get to all of what you've said and what we talk about a lot in the public discourse, is to go into the classrooms, into the mods at the detention center, into where the kids are, and look at what we are doing. And if something is empowering them, or if the classroom culture is in fact changing, which we want to transform, we want to transform the classroom, quote, or I want to call the detention center a classroom because that's how we've developed it, as a positive culture where it's academic, it's intellectual, but it's critical, it's inquiry. It's all the things where you're looking at what's going on with us together, the students are involved, with us looking at this culture. And if it's working, why? Let's be able to say, here's what's working, here's what we've transformed, and here's how we did it. And to me, kids all are in school at one point or the other. So if we can have this be on a bigger scale and working in teacher education, learning how to do this, these cultures we're setting up and building with kids is really, really very important. And then when they leave school or come, go outside after school, to go home, these things going on in their communities, we have discussed in this classroom. We don't just bring in stuff that doesn't matter. We bring in what's going on in your community, what's going on in this little community here with us, what are we doing with each other, and how are we transforming anything? And it all goes back to how we're thinking and working with each other in the situation.
Well, and what I hear you saying is that Dr. Salter's talking about theoretical research, which is absolutely important. Dr. Pane's talking about translational research. How are we going to use the research to make change? And what I think I hear Amalio talking about is you've got to have somebody who's taking that theoretical research and figuring out how to use it as well, so it contributes to the transformation that we're looking for. So you've touched on all of them. Awesome. Cool. Next question, and so Amalio provided the segue for this question this time. So Amalio, I'm going to ask you to start. You already told us about the success of the program. When you got how many percent of kids who aren't coming back. So that's what I was pulling for in this next question: success stories. So can you tell me about one success that's associated with your program that gives a story of hope, that we can change this, and this is what it might look like. This is what success would look like.
Sure. Well, as Dr. Sterrett mentioned in her introduction, back in 2011, Broward County Schools had the dubious distinction of being first in the state in the number of school-related arrests. And so that was very concerning to an entire community. And the NAACP, as well as the Advancement Project out of DC, came to see our current superintendent, Robert Runcie, after many years of trying to really gain access to the school district to really discuss the importance of this issue. And so through the work of this group and with partners such as Fort Lauderdale Police Department and the Broward Sheriff's Office, the community forged a collaborative agreement on school discipline, which brought about changes in policies, including our Code of Student Conduct, really reducing the amount of days students were being suspended. We also created alternatives for students who committed some misdemeanor offenses, and then really looked at some of our policies and our practices and our programs, including the development of the Promise program. And you have some literature at your tables about that program. One story that I can tell you is that although, again, I think what we've learned in our success story is that children are just that, children. No matter how big and scary they may appear to us, they are children. And my supervisor tells this story that I'm going to share with you real quick. She remembers arriving at the Promise location, and when the students arrive at the Promise location and get off the school bus, they are searched. And we take their cell phones away, so that way they can again focus on learning when they are in the environment. And so she says that as she was sitting in her car, the school bus, and here is this young black man, and he is just big, football player looking, and just looked so tough. And she was watching him stand in line and go through the processes that they have there at the Promise program. So she says she didn't pay any mind to it, and then she went about her business. So as she was touring the facility, she walked into the area where we have some family counselor interns working with the students. And there she sees this young black man who was this football player type looking, and he was with the counselor, and he was just bawling his eyes out. And she says that just drove to her the point of what this work is all about. That these students, many of these students, just need somebody to listen to them, somebody to just spend some time with them and just give them the time and opportunity to share what's in their hearts and in their minds. And so if I think of any success, I think of those 90% that have never returned. How many similar stories do we have of children that we've diverted away from the legal system and really have given them a second chance and an opportunity? And so I really feel that that's one of the success stories that we've seen in Broward.
Okay. One of the success stories, I am a member of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. It's one of our Black Greek letter organizations. And within the organization, we have a mentoring program, our Men of Tomorrow, and I'm the chairperson of that. During our program, we have young men that come in our program. We teach them everything about life skills and these type of things, and all about success. And we want them to go to college, and we say, we don't want you to go to college, we want you to graduate from college. And in the program, there was one young man that's a few years back to where he was in the program, he had a 2.1, so when OIC was talking about that 1.9 to 2.9, he had that 2.1 grade point average, and we were talking about what do you want to be, what do you want to do as a career? He said, I want to be a law enforcement officer. The thing I need to tell you about this program, we started meeting at the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. So it's a kind of an interesting thing. We have black males walking in the police department, walking out without handcuffs on. It's a beautiful thing. So when we were in there and just talking, these are guys, we have a lot of them grade point averages all the way at 4.9s and all this type of stuff, but we want everybody in there together. He said that he wanted to do that, and I told him, I said, 2.1, you can apply, but you can't be successful in this career. You need to go to college because you need a high school degree or GED to apply for law enforcement. I said, no, you go to college, come back with your college degree. The individual ended up going to Florida A&M University, got his grade point average up, went to Florida A&M University, got his grade point average in college was a 3.4, 3.5, was president of some criminal justice organizations, joined fraternity, did all of that. Then he applied for a police department. I always want to be there for any opportunities. He said, I hadn't even thought about this police department, but you told me if I go, represent. So he threw on his suit, went down there. The interviewer was not interested in really talking to him. He could tell, you know, they've been there, that kind of feeling that you get when people don't want to be bothered. Because in law enforcement, we have some agencies have a no tattoo policy. So you can't have it not visible anywhere. You tell me who that's targeted toward, what segment of society and what most groups have tattoos, at least one or two. That's gonna be your black and brown folk. We got them, you know? So now he knew not to have one, so he didn't have one. They hired him at the police department, but once you get in the agency, you have your orientations, you have your probation. During the probation, they found little technicalities and they washed him out. But then I said, stick with it, we're going back. Now he's gotten a job, he's with another police agency, and he sent the video talking about how much our program meant to him and where it is with him. So this is one that started, and now we've gone through, and he is now serving in law enforcement. Thank you.
Dr. Pane.
I would say that our E-SToPP's Positive Peer Leadership Mentoring Program we conduct in the TGK, that's the Turner Guilford Knight Correctional Center for youth that have been direct filed as an adult. We conduct PPLM, that's the short for Positive Peer Leadership Mentoring. We conduct sessions there, and we conduct sessions at the Miami-Dade Juvenile Detention Center, it's a regional here, Juvenile Detention Center. The kids, the young, mostly black and some brown males in the TGK will be there probably a year or more, waiting for their charges or whatever to be completed. The kids and again, mostly black and brown males are in the detention center for approximately 21 days. It varies. So we have two situations that we go in to conduct our Positive Peer Leadership Mentoring sessions. They are conducted as a critical community of practice. We share all of this up front with the boys. We tell them we're there. First of all, we ask them, who wants to graduate from, when we come in, we're all, hi, good morning. Who wants to graduate from high school? Who wants to graduate from college? Who wants to have professional everything? Yes, they do. They want that. And we tell them up front, our goal is to ultimately navigate with you once you're released back into the system, back to high school, wherever you reenter, all your wraparound services, etc. That's our ultimate goal. So if you stick with us, we're going to get it going. We're preparing it. So we're honest. We tell them where we are. Right now, we're going to show you what it looks like for us to learn from each other in this critical community of practice inside this detention center or this correctional center. So we can't necessarily get in a circle, but we do at TGK. They let us because the chairs move. But nonetheless, the process is similar. We start out immediately. We get our our wall chart on the wall, and we say, okay, what do you know about X, Y, and Z? We first bring up the concepts of PPLM, eradicating the school-to-prison pipeline. What do you know about that? And they know a lot. Once you let them know we want to hear what you know, we're going to put it on the wall because that's how we learn ourselves. What do you know about community meetings? What do you know about Positive Peer Leadership Mentoring? So we brainstorm a lot in the beginning. We bring in literacy pieces to critique during the session. And then we end up with them writing their reflections of the session, and they're published in a newsletter that's distributed in the community. So this is kind of the process in our 1-hour session. The positives that we see from these sessions are that we come in and provide hope, and we share openly where this hope is headed with the boys. We ask them to join in immediately with working on the problems in their own community and in the community with each other. Because many people say, how can you work with them? They're from this clique and this gang and that gang. But it is totally amazing when you expect that we're going to work together and you accept what they say and believe and want, and so on. And then they see themselves working together. It's just really neat. I wish you could all, and you're invited to join us at any time. But the story that I see that's so intriguing to us at TGK, this is where they're there direct files adults. They have 2 mods or units. One is the better mod, the better kids, and one is the bad ones, according to the staff. This is what we've learned along. So at first we weren't even allowed to go into the bad one because there's too many fights and whatnot going on. But over time, after we started with one mod and things were going really well and we're enjoying it and we're getting to know the staff, we are the administrators, and we asked, can we start going into mod, whatever the number is? And they said, okay, we'll try it. So we did. The first day, we had maybe 6 boys join us. And we figured, well, that's all there are. Well, no, it turns out that others are in lockdown, or lately we found out that they weren't even allowing them out because the boys fight too much. Recently, after about, I don't know how many months we've been in that mod, but the whole thing's been going on for 2 or 3 years, PPLM. But recently, the last month or 2, we've noticed all the boys come down out of their rooms because they want to, and the guards are letting them. This is such a positive for us because we're seeing little bitty things happen at a time, but the boys are starting to work together with us, and we get to work with them. It's just, to me, that's so positive and so little, but it's huge. So anyway, that's it.
My next question, which is my last question, and then we'll see what we have, if anybody in the audience has questions. But again, each of you brings a unique perspective and unique experience. So from your perspective, given your experience, what do you think are ways people want to do something and they don't know what to do? So from your perspective, what are ways that people can most effectively get involved? And who wants to go first?
I'll go first. You can get involved with PPLM. We offer orientations, which give you an idea of what will happen when you go into the detention center now in the correctional center. You can, and from these orientations, you can basically sign up and become volunteers and go in with us into these sessions I was explaining. We're working towards an effective mentoring program incorporated into PPLM for those that want to volunteer on a long-term basis as mentors in preparation for our mentoring that goes on in this navigation route I was talking about earlier. We've written and submitted a grant with the OJJDP proposing our long-term mentoring navigation route with the boys that are released from detention and wanting to go back to school, their reentry process. So please become involved with us, and that's something where you can be in a supportive atmosphere with others that have done this a long time, and we're working to make it better and have others involved in this critical process. Thank you.
If you really, sorry about that, didn't mean to cut off your applause.
Yes, you did.
One of the things that you can do is also find out exactly, if you're trying to help someone, you need to find out who they are. So you need to, if you don't have the black males in your school, if you look at it right now, you don't have black males as educators in your K through 12, and you're really K through 6. Why is that? It's very difficult to take care of a family on the salary that our educational system pays us, K through 6. And that goes for males and females, but that's why you don't have the black males in there. They will be in your high school so they can get the supplementals. So if you don't understand why we're trying to do this, talk to us. We'll let you know. And if you're looking at it from a theoretical basis, you all might want to jot it down. Dr. Jawanza Kanjufu, he deals with black males and talks about it. That's what his whole research is on, the conspiracy against the black male. So you can read him as a nugget to find out a little bit more about what's going on and some things that you can do. I'll be around, we can talk, anything that we need to do to really engage. And you have to look at it. How can those black males in your class help you get to be the teacher of the year? You'll be surprised how they can do it, because if you deal with the bottom half, they're gonna drive it up. That's it. If you can get little Johnny to doing what you need to do, Janet, man, please, that was it. It's not that they want to be rambunctious. All you got to do is engage them. You'll be surprised. If you treat, a lot of times dealing with these different pedagogies and andragogies, if you start telling little Johnny that he can read, what will Johnny do? Read. I was one of those that I didn't like to read. It was my 5th grade teacher that made me read. I was one of those that got put into a math class and she was trying to push me, kind of like Dr. Rocco's always trying to make us write stuff and do this. She pushes you. But she pushes you because she believes in you. How many of us have been pushed by somebody to do something we didn't think we would do? And once you've been stretched, you can't go back to where you were. So a lot of times that's what we need to do to little Johnny and Raheem, is to push them, to show them what it is that they can do, because they've only been told that they can do negative things and they're proving that. So read it, let's find out it and get engaged.
Well, I think you've taken the first step here, being at this conference today, and that is to really step up and learn more about this important issue that impacts our communities. And so I challenge you to continue to stretch your learnings. I know that that's what's happened to me as a result of this work, and it's taken me down paths that I never thought to explore. And so I've grown as an individual, as an educator, and I think that is so key to moving this work forward. I think once we do that, the more we learn, the more we can then advocate. And we're at a critical time where we need all of you to really advocate on behalf of our youth. And it's an important, I think, turning point in this country to really begin addressing the needs of our youth, particularly our young men of color. And I think the last part is, of course, taking action. And I always tell my team, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And so for me, this path has been life-changing for me. And I'm sure that for my colleagues, that for them, I've heard from their stories here that their work around these efforts has been life-changing for them. And so I invite you to be great and to take this issue on yourselves and carrying it out to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I've had a couple of people taking advantage of the note cards we left on the table, so I have a couple of questions from the audience. This one, I think, should go to you, Dr. Salter. And then if Dr. Pane and Mr. Nieves have something to say. This question is, what are the police department organizations doing to change profiling against African Americans and teenagers in general, and to stop criminalizing them before they have done anything wrong?
That's to the point.
Okay. Well, two sides of this story. One, profiling is a legal law enforcement tool, so do not get confused with thinking that because we profile that is illegal. What is illegal in the United States is racial profiling. It just means, but I stopped you, I took action from a law enforcement standpoint merely based on the color of your skin. Now, if you happen to be black and you happen to have robbed a bank, or you happen to fit the description of someone who has done that, that is not racial profiling. So we're having to educate individuals on what that actually is. And in my dissertation, when we did a lot more research, when you go into other countries, ethnic profiling in other countries is a legal law enforcement tactic. Also, as we enjoy our status in society and we go on cruises, when you're in international waters or you're going in and out of ports, there's no such thing as whether or not they target you or don't target you, because you are subject to check. Now, when they're in those areas and they stop you and they check you, there is no law against that. So we must understand that when we're putting things out there and people will look at law enforcement, that's why I also said in terms of our educational system, you are racially profiling when you send in little Raheem out of your class. And so when you're sending him out there, then you're putting him in that pipeline, because when he's not in school and mom is working 2 or 3 jobs as a single parent, or dad being a single parent working 2 or 3 jobs, Raheem is home. So when Raheem is home and we as law enforcement see him, are we racially profiling when we see him? Or are we doing our job because you called us because your neighborhood is being broken into? So we are, from a law enforcement standpoint, we're making sure our professionals know what the difference between racial profiling is and what profiling is. But what happens is it is so murky, the definition, and there is not one common definition of racial profiling. Also, with us researchers, there are so many factors in the research to where it is so skewed. You can't tell. How many times have you seen a cop found guilty of racial profiling? The only time you're going to see that is when the cop says, I stopped him, and that would be New Jersey, 1999, on the New Jersey State Turnpike, when they stopped the trooper and asked, did you racially profile? He said, yes, I stopped him because blacks coming up here have dope in their car. Outside of that, how do you sustain a charge of racial profiling? Because there's going to be other factors which makes it not racially profiling. So from the public standpoint, that's what we need to understand. And in law enforcement, like I said, it depends on how you use research. So if I come in there as a major, 22 years of experience and all the other stuff, and I say this is racial profiling, that means all I do is just write their report so detailed and have so many other issues and other factors, that takes it out of the racial profiling. It just makes it a simple profile, which makes it real cloudy. Thank you.
Amalio.
If I can add, one of the things, and I don't know if Dr. Salters is aware, but we've been working with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. Broward County Public Schools has been working to really look at how do we merge some training together between law enforcement and school educators around issues that talk about race. And one of the things the school district has been doing is Glenn Singleton's work on courageous conversations around race, but we're also looking at some work, and I'm not sure who the creator of this program, but it's an active shooter training series, and really that focuses on race again. And so we've been having conversations between both entities to carry out some of this training in the future.
Just to clarify, and that's why I like this type of deal, and hopefully everyone in here is going to be networking, talking with each other after this, because as Mr. Nieves says, the individual that is started the active shooter is Detective Steve Smith. He works for me. And the individual that's now the chief of police for the Broward County School Board went to the police academy with me. That's Chief Anthony Williams. So, and then also the individual that's your second in charge, Dr. Blackburn, is a fraternity brother of mine. So that's the second in charge. So when you look at it, those networks are working. So just because you don't see me or others that might be stating stuff there, it's just like in education. When you have your champion up there, things just tend to run around it. So those particular programs that he's talking about, I have signed off on the active shooter program. That are the guys that Steve Smith works for, me, dealing with Homeland Security and all those type things. So all of these things are kind of intertwining there. So that's why I say you have to get involved, be involved, and it begins to go through everything that we do.
Pane, did you want to jump in on this one?
Well, if you look at it from a teacher standpoint, the risk research I mentioned earlier was about the teacher that would, put her kids into the groups according to the color of their skin, basically. That was one of the first instances the educational research came across criminalization in the classroom. But this, it pertains to this because if in fact we are knowledgeable about what's going on with what you're talking about, and what some of my research or that I found in the educational realm, where disproportional school discipline actually mimics or relates to and ends up with kids in the school to prison pipeline, basically. So I had to look up and understand what disproportional meant, and it means that if there's, let's say, 15% black students in the nation's classrooms, and the disproportional part comes in where if you're, 15% of the students, of all the students, let's say, are black. 10% either above or below representation of black students in any area, no matter whether it's special ed, like you said back in the old days, but any area at all. But let's call it discipline, because that was my research. If you have more than 15% of black students involved in exclusionary school discipline, which is starting where they get referred to the classroom all the way down to they end up in prison, that's disproportional. So let's say that in a little chart I've made up, if I recall it correctly, about 48% of the kids end up in prison, but up in the referral and the discipline area when they're kicked out of school and whatnot. Let's say in Miami-Dade it's 25%, I'm just guessing without looking. That's way above 15% representation of these kids in the system. So I'm probably not explaining it well, but if I know this concept as a teacher, then when I look at a child in my classroom and I say, well, should I kick him out or should I not? If you realize, wait, if he's black, for example, and maybe he's just being jumpy and very, his culture is very active and whatnot, it's exciting and I love it now, I understand. However, but if I'm going to kick him out, then am I putting him into this pipeline because of that? Am I going to be part of this disproportional exclusionary school discipline thing going on? If we don't even know that concept, in my case I didn't know this kind of things, but if I have it in my mind and I'm educating myself in this area, then I won't be part of the criminalization of black males in the classroom, because I think twice, okay, what else can I do? You know what I'm saying? It's on this mindset, but if we don't think about it or even know about it, it wouldn't come across our mind, and we might continue our same classroom practices without knowing what we're pretty much doing in the long run. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I have one last question, and our time is good. So this is, again, a question from the audience. Are there interventions that can work at the home level that can serve to eradicate the school prison pipeline? So are there things that parents could be doing at home? Are there programs? Should there be programs? Or would that not be a valuable exercise?
I guess I'll take the lead on this one. One of the things that you can start at home from an educational standpoint, we have to have parental involvement. If you notice the schools that have the highest test scores, they tend to have the highest number of individuals attending the PTAs. So when you are having them out there at your school, the parents, you need to educate them and show them what's going on. So therefore, when you're what happens is most times when you have the little black boys, parents are out there working 2 and 3 jobs, and this happens in multiple communities. If the parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, they don't have the time to come to your parent-teacher meetings. How many of us have been to a meeting that when you're there, you're wondering, why in the world am I here? This is totally a waste of my time. When you go to a parent-teacher meeting, some of those are waste of times. So if you're wanting to have the involvement of busy people, you better have something there that is worth their time to come. Don't just say, we're glad you're here, here's the report card, see you later. Give them something that they're needing to hear, engage them in the meetings to make it worth their while, because when they're there, then you're having the kids. What worked when we were growing up? If we messed up, we knew our parents were going to be coming to parent-teacher night. They got the teacher on speed dial, they're sitting with them in church, but that's not happening now. And also, when you look at it with our diversity in both of our professions, how many times as we as educators, you might come in and you're living in the suburbs, but your school is in the urban environment. You aren't familiar with it. A rapper wrote a song about saying, if you're not from the hood, don't come to the hood. And a lot of people don't want to be there as it is. So what you're having to do is get engaged with those parents. We might need those Joe Clarks from Lean On Me. We need those kind of teachers. So you need those teachers in there. So get your parents involved, because the parent involvement in education will also help disrupt this the school to prison pipeline, because you can't find a parent that went to prison that wants their child to follow the same road that they did.
One of the goals of E-SToPP is to, or the mission actually, is to build a transformative network of schools and educational opportunities for youth that are either underserved or unserved, specifically those that have been suspended, expelled, incarcerated. So our vision of building a school of this sort would be it would be a grassroots thing where the parents are involved as a, quote, advisory board from the very, very, very beginning in developing the school and the way it would look, just like we would do in PPLM or in the classroom. You engage the kids from the moment you sit down. So before we would build the schools, this sounds like a pie-in-the-sky vision, but I honestly think it's possible. Bring the parents in, bring the community, everybody sit down, and we're going to talk about what's this going to look like now, and, do it together, and then we all move forward as we hope it will look and work together. So that would be my vision of involving the parents from the beginning of a situation like that.
Well, I agree with Dr. Salters on his point, and I really love the fact that he used the word engage our parents. And again, one of the things that we have to think as educators is we have to redefine what parent engagement or parent involvement means. For those parents, as Dr. Salters pointed out, that work 2 and 3 jobs. Just because I don't show up at the doorstep of the schoolhouse doesn't mean that I'm disengaged or that I don't care about our children. But that's the perception that some, not all of our educators have. And I think that our parents are sometimes offended that we think that they are not involved in the lives of their children. If I can get my child to school every day, I'm involved. If I can take care of my child when he or she is sick, I'm engaged. If I'm looking at the daily notes that come home from the teacher, I'm engaged. Just because, again, I don't show up. So I think, again, I agree with you, Dr. Salters, is that we really have to look at, first of all, how we define engagement, and second of all, if we get parents to the doorstep of our schools, that we really meaningfully engage themselves. We have to model for our parents what we want them to do with their children. And if we are not effective at doing that, then how can we expect our parents to do the same? And so those are important steps. By the way, I think about, when you said your story, I thought about, as growing up, it just took one time to be called to the principal's office, and knowing that my mom had a meeting a PTA meeting that night, and so it just brought me back to 6th grade.
What happened after the meeting?
Well, I cried myself out of it, so my mother never found out. But those strategies worked in those days. But again, getting back to a serious note is really redefining what engagement is.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and I actually want to ask a follow-up related to this, related to the question and related to your responses. I completely have always recognized that parents don't come because they're trying to keep a home together. I have always thought, and so this is a 2-part question. I have always thought that one of the it's intimidating. And they don't come because they don't feel like they're treated respectfully and they are uncomfortable in the school. So I want to ask both my questions and then I'm going to ask for your response. So number one, do you think I'm right? But number two, this follow-up question is, if I'm right and parents stay away because they're intimidated and they don't know how to interact with the teacher, they're not comfortable, would a possible home-based intervention be to provide parents with the questions to ask the teacher? Because Detective Salter's exactly right. If you've got a teacher who's not really engaging with those parents, just making them come in, handing them a report card and sending them off, if you equip the parents with some tools to not let the teacher get away with that, but the teacher's got to interact with you if you're asking good questions, would that be a home intervention to tell the parents, there's a parent night, here's the questions to ask your teacher?
I'll start that one. One of the things that you look at is, as a parent, you don't need to leave your house and your hustle and bustle of making money and getting bad news from your boss, perhaps bad news from the IRS and everybody else, to go to school to get more bad news. I really don't need to do that. I can just stay home and watch the news. And right, more bad news. And then when you're saying, I don't want to say no to any type of intervention, because all types of intervention, that's why they're put there. Even if they might not be as significant impact as you want it is you doing something. And sometimes we do things for the sake of checking off a box for school board. Yes, we did do that intervention. How many interventions have you done? Well, I have to do these 3 before I can get to this. And some of that's needed before you can do your paperwork to move them into the ESE or the other program. You have to have so many checkoffs. So what we're looking at is, if you're really trying to engage that parent and we're trying to do things, aren't there positive ways to say things negatively? The teachers that dealt with me the most, they always talked about me not living up to my potential. This is not your potential. When I talk to the young men, if you ever ask somebody what their grade point average is and they act like they don't know it, I like when they do that. Because what does that do? What are they actually saying? They know what it is, but the grade point average isn't indicative of them. So they're acting shame or acting like they don't know it. If they came over there, yeah, mine's a 0.5, I'd be concerned. I haven't met anybody like that, but sometimes by merely asking the question, you begin that conversation. And I ask them, is that grade point average indicative of you? And when they tell me it isn't, it begins right there with the child. Then when you're talking to the parents, you're like, I know that Greg is not living up to his potential. We need you to help us get there. Do you want them to be better than you? Oh, most definitely. Now you're hitting into their points and getting into their why. So many times we don't find out what the parent's why is. That's what we do. Get to that parent's why, ask them what it is, and your interventions, yes, do the home-based interventions, because also you don't want to be put in an embarrassing situation when you're going over there, and you know how it is at the nights. You can tell when the parents are happy. They're staying back. Yes, we're going for the AP classes. Yes, we're going to be sending them to Australia for the summer. Well, Johnny, where are you going? Well, we aren't having summer school this year. And then we're having those issues. So engage them. Talk from a positive standpoint. Everything can be put on a positive spin.
That's related to Amalio was talking earlier about a strength-based perspective.
Yes.
You can theoretically give those teachers strength-based questions to ask. Start with, what's my child doing well? What's his best subject? Train, pull for that. If they're not getting it automatically, train to pull for it.
Definitely.
As I was thinking about what Dr. Salters was saying, my department oversees the district's response to intervention pieces. And so a lot of the times we hear the language 1, 2, 3, right? Tier 2, Tier 3, we're going to refer to evaluation. And the other day I was sitting at a meeting where you have a director over one of our programs who was a former principal, and now she was going into a collaborative problem-solving team session for her own child, and she's sitting there. Here's a director who, again, has experience, a wealth of experience, and she's sitting at the table, and she said she was made to feel so inferior as a parent now, sitting at that table. And I think one of the things, again, in thinking of our parents, is that they just want to be talked to at a level that even, no matter how educated they may be, speak to me at a level where I can understand and take what you tell me and do something with it. And I think that's important, that we can't get into acronyms, and that we stop this terminology in the response to intervention world. I almost used an acronym there, in the response to intervention world. And I think too, the second piece around all of this, from my conversations time and time, because we get parent calls on a multitude of issues in our departments, parents want to know that teachers care. Do you care about my child? I want to hear that from you. And so many times they just get the bad news. They don't get the I care about your child. And if I think it would change the conversations around the tables if we as educators took that extra step.
Very good. We're actually over time, so I'm going to give you,
Real short.
take what you need, but we're over time.
And as they mentioned, policies always play out differently in context. So if a teacher has certain policies of discipline, for example, or anything she has to do or say she does, it will play out differently. Speaking to the kids that are isolated, that I deal with, they're isolated from all traditional, anything's going on in the system. Their parents are double isolated. What I feel works best for us, or has worked best with the isolated people, is when you sit with them first and listen. What are we doing here? What's going on? Who is here? How do we get our parents in here with us to proceed with what we would like to get done? What do we want done? What are our questions? You start really with the people involved and work with their questions and their goals, and that is the strength-based we're talking about. Build on their strengths, goals, and make it happen as best as you can with them. So that fits in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to have you all join me in thanking our panelists today. And I'm sure they're available if you want to catch a word, and I think our next sessions are getting ready to start.